Hello, my name is Teresa. The night my sister beat me until I couldn't stand wasn't the worst part. It was hearing my mother's voice on the other side of the door, calm, cold, certain. You deserved it. I thought winning that scholarship would finally make them proud. Instead, it turned me into the enemy. They rewrote my story, forged my words, called me unstable. And when I screamed for help, all I heard was silence. But silence doesn't mean surrender. I brought everything they buried into the light, one file, one bruise, one lie at a time. You ever wonder what happens when the scapegoat stops playing along? Because I found out, and so did they. The envelope had my name printed in that familiar serif font. Sharp, clean, official. I knew what it was the moment I saw it, sitting on the kitchen counter next to a half-eaten banana and one of Mom's subscription catalogs. I picked it up with both hands, fingers trembling only slightly, and read the sender. Center for Bioethics Advancement, Full Fellowship Committee. I stood there for a second, just breathing. I didn't tear into it right away. I walked to my room, shut the door softly behind me, sat on my bed, and peeled the seal like it was glass. You've been awarded the 2023 Wilmington Fellowship in Bioethics. The rest of the words became a blur. I blinked hard and let out a shaky exhale. After everything, the years of night classes, double shifts at the clinic, those months I drove 90 minutes each way just to audit a seminar, I had finally won something they all said I didn't belong in. That night, I told them over dinner. I even waited until after the grace Vera insisted we say, though she always prayed a little longer if Callista was in a bad mood, like she could bless the bitterness away. I got the fellowship, I said. I even smiled. The one with the full ride to the Easton Institute. They accepted my proposal on ethical frameworks in rural medical care, clatter. Callista dropped her fork. Vera didn't look up from her salad. Oh, she said, spearing a cucumber. Well, I hope that doesn't mean you'll be leaving us too soon. Callista gave a dry chuckle and muttered, Seriously? Before pushing back from the table and heading to her room. I sat there, hands in my lap, trying not to shrink. No one asked what my proposal was about. No one said congratulations. Vera changed the subject to a potluck at church next Thursday, and I chewed through the rest of my dinner in silence. Later that night, while washing dishes, I overheard Vera on the phone with Aunt Rachel. Yeah. No, Callista didn't get it this year. No, Teresa, she got into something. Some program, bio, whatever. Not sure how, to be honest. You know she's always been persistent. Persistent, like a bug you can't quite squash. I didn't confront her. I just wiped my hands dry and went to bed, the fellowship letter tucked beneath my pillow like a secret. The days that followed were a haze of near celebrations that didn't happen. I made myself coffee every morning with a touch more cream, like that small luxury might fill the space their support didn't. At work, my supervisor hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. She made a post about me on LinkedIn, said she'd never seen someone fight so hard to be in rooms that weren't built for them. I smiled for the camera. I didn't tell her how at home I barely existed. Callista started leaving her dishes in the sink. She never used to do that. One day, she accidentally used my laundry detergent and claimed it gave her hives. Another time, I came home to find all my notes from the fellowship prep crumpled under the weight of a wet gym towel on the kitchen island. It was little things, sharp corners disguised as carelessness. Mom stayed neutral, or so she said. She's adjusting, she'd offer. You know how much this meant to her. I wanted to scream, what about what it means to me? But instead, I nodded, because screaming in that house was like yelling into a vacuum. Everything got swallowed, nothing echoed back. One night, I pulled out my old journal, the one with the faded maroon cover I'd started back when Callista got into Tulane and I got into community college. I wrote, maybe I wasn't supposed to win anything. Maybe being good at something makes me look selfish. I read it twice, then underlined selfish. I thought about declining the fellowship, thought about staying and proving to them that I could be humble about it, that I wouldn't rub it in their faces, even if I had earned every letter in that acceptance. But that thought passed quickly, replaced by something heavier. A memory. I was 9. I had just won first place in the county spelling bee. Vera brought Callista to the ceremony, dressed her in a lavender dress with a ribbon that matched her eyeshadow. I stood on stage with my certificate, and as I waved to the crowd, I spotted Mom in the second row, whispering to Callista. When I came down to greet them, Mom smiled and said, "Don't make her feel bad just because you're good with words." So I stopped being good out loud. Until now. A week later, I overheard Callista on the phone with one of her friends. "She acts like it's a big deal," she said. "Bioethics. What even is that? She probably got in because they needed diversity or some crap. They always pick the quiet ones. No threat." I didn't say anything then either. But that night, I wrote a reply in my journal. "They picked me because I earned it. I'm not quiet, I'm strategic. But even strategies unravel when the ground beneath you shifts." It was nearly 9 p.m. when I walked into the kitchen one evening to refill my water bottle. The lights were low, casting long shadows from the ceiling fan. I heard their voices before I saw them, Vera and Callista, huddled by the sink, whispering. They stopped mid-sentence when they saw me. Callista turned, raised her wine glass with a smirk. "Some people just don't know their place," she said, as if she were toasting to something ugly she was proud of. Vera didn't say a word. I stared at both of them, just looked, not blinking, not nodding. And in that stillness, something inside me cracked, not loud, not sharp, but enough to echo. I didn't say anything after Callista's jab. I just turned, walked to the sink, rinsed my glass, and headed back to my room like the obedient ghost they'd trained me to be. But something in me had shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was that dense kind of pressure you feel when a dam starts to fracture from the inside. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. It was one of those soft spring mornings where the birds outside were too chipper for my mood. I showered, dressed, and grabbed my phone to check emails, part of my routine before heading into the clinic. That's when I saw it. A message from Dr. Holloway, the program director for the Easton Fellowship, sent at 6:42 a.m. "Hi, Teresa. I appreciate your willingness to take responsibility and your letter of apology. I've shared it with the committee. We'll be in touch soon." I reread it 3 times. What letter? I never wrote any apology. I opened my sent folder. Nothing. Drafts, empty, spam, clean. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. I opened my laptop and logged into the shared desktop Vera used in the kitchen, an older model she kept saying she'd replace once we get our feet under us again. She never did. I navigated to her user profile, then her documents folder. The files were a mess: receipts, donation letters, lesson plans from years past. But one file stood out. Its title was vague. "To whom it may concern. Regret letter." I clicked. Inside was a perfectly formatted email, written from my supposed voice. "I deeply regret the assistance I requested during the essay process. I understand the importance of integrity. I hope the committee will view this as a learning opportunity." It read like someone trying to sound humble, but not like me. The phrasing was too formal, too calculated, like someone was anticipating judgment and trying to preemptively mold the narrative. I closed the file and sat still, my hands flat on the table, heart pounding, not in panic, but in a quiet fury. My own mother had drafted a confession for something I never did, and she sent it. By the time I stood up, my knees felt numb. Vera was in the living room, sipping decaf from her favorite mug, the one that said "Best Mom Ever" in chipped pink letters. The TV was on low, some home renovation show with cheerful hosts talking about backsplash tiles. "Morning," she said, not looking up. "Did you send something to the fellowship board?" I asked. She blinked, then shrugged. "I might have." "Just a little note, nothing serious." "A note that said I cheated?" "Teresa." Her tone turned parental, weary. "You know how these things work. Rumors fly. People whisper. I was trying to protect you before it got out of control." I laughed once, sharp, bitter. "By lying for me? Or about me?" She set the mug down, finally looking at me. "If you didn't do anything wrong, why are you so upset?" Callista, lounging on the couch, barely glanced up from her phone. "God, Teresa, Paranoia isn't a good look on you. I turned and walked out without another word, but not before grabbing a flash drive from the drawer. By Saturday, I was still seething, not the shaking kind of anger, the kind that simmers just beneath the surface, ready to boil over if stirred. That afternoon, I opened Instagram out of habit while eating lunch alone in the clinic break room. A tagged post caught my eye. Aunt Rachel's account. The caption read, "Lifting spirits for our sweet Callista." Life doesn't always go as planned, but family lifts you up. I tapped through the photos. Our backyard, balloons, flowers, sheet cake, smiling faces, Callista in the center, holding a gift bag. I hadn't been invited. They threw her a cheer-up party because she didn't get the fellowship. And I, the one who actually won it, hadn't even been mentioned. Not once. My thumb hovered over the phone screen as my stomach twisted. It wasn't the party. It was the message behind it. Callista's disappointment matters more than your achievement. That night, I didn't come out of my room for dinner. No one came looking. Around 9 p.m., I overheard Vera on the phone again. "She's been off lately," she said. "Withdrawn. Maybe it's the pressure. That program she got into. Some people just aren't built for it." I clenched my jaw, gripping the pen in my hand until it bent. After the call ended, I opened my inbox, needing to escape. A new email had arrived. Subject line, "Scholarship status, under review." I stared at the words, each one like a cold splash to the face. I opened it. "Due to recent correspondence and concerns regarding academic conduct, your file is under internal review. You will be notified of the committee's final decision within 10 business days." The room spun for a moment, but I didn't panic. I closed my laptop, stood, and paced the room. I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, not sadness, just a pressure like something deep in my bones telling me, this is it. This is how they erase you. But not this time. They'd pushed me so close to the edge that I finally saw it clearly. There was no saving what we used to be. There was only the truth. And the truth was going to be louder than any email they sent on my behalf. After reading that email, I couldn't breathe. I sat still for what felt like hours, staring at the screen as if it would blink and reveal a correction. But the words stayed there, cold and final. Under review due to conduct concerns. Those weren't just words, they were the nail being hammered into my future. I didn't respond right away. I just closed my laptop, grabbed a sweater, and walked. No destination, just movement. Past the hedges Vera trimmed every Sunday, past the neighbors' porch lights glowing like tiny suns, past the place where we used to ride bikes until dusk when I was still allowed to be a child, and Callista still remembered how to laugh with me instead of at me. By the time I returned home, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. It was nearly 11 p.m. The air inside felt heavier than outside. I walked slowly through the hallway, the floor creaking beneath me like it was warning me to turn around. I reached my bedroom door and paused. It was ajar. That alone was strange. I've always been meticulous about closing it, a small habit formed from growing up in a home where privacy was constantly negotiated. My hand touched the doorknob and I felt my stomach tighten. I pushed it open. The scene hit me like a punch to the gut. My room looked ransacked. The contents of my desk drawer were scattered across the floor. My chair was on its side. The lamp had been knocked over. My books, every single one of them, were pulled off the shelves, pages bent, covers torn, and Callista was sitting on my bed. She wasn't crying, she wasn't panicked. She was just there, holding my journal in one hand and a half-empty wine glass in the other. Her eyes were glassy, but not from sadness. "You think you deserve this life more than me?" she asked, her voice too calm, too steady. I didn't answer. I stepped further into the room and glanced at the journal in her lap, open to the page I'd written that night after finding out about the forged apology letter. Callista read it aloud. "They picked me because I earned it. I'm not quiet. I'm strategic." She scoffed. "Strategic, huh? That's cute. You think all this makes you special?" She stood, towering over me, even in her bare feet. "You're nothing but a placeholder. They gave you a seat to check a box." "Callista, no." She raised her hand, silencing me. I watched Mom bend over backward for you. She made excuses for you, cleaned up your messes, gave up things for you, and now you act like you've risen above us? That's not what I'm doing. You think you're better than me, she spat. Say it. I took a slow breath. I don't think I'm better. I think I'm enough. That was it. She lunged. It wasn't a slap. It wasn't a shove. It was a full-bodied, two-handed shove to my shoulders that sent me back into the dresser with a loud crack. Pain shot through my side as I collapsed to the floor. I gasped, stunned, trying to process what just happened. Before I could get up, her foot connected with my ribs. Once, twice. I tried to roll away, but she grabbed my arm and yanked. Something in my wrist gave with a sickening pop, and I screamed, an involuntary, animalistic sound that came from somewhere deep. The door flew open. Vera stood there, arms crossed, eyes narrow. I cried out, "Mom!" She didn't move. She didn't even blink. "She attacked me," I said, my voice cracking. "Please, help me." Vera looked at Callista, who was breathing hard, hair falling into her face, then back at me. "You deserved it," she said. Then she turned and pulled the door shut. That sound, the click of the door latching, was louder than the scream still stuck in my throat. I don't remember everything after that. I remember trying to crawl. I remember my vision doubling. I remember pain. Not sharp, but deep. A kind of ache that radiated from my spine to my chest. I remember trying to reach my phone, only for it to slide under the bed from my trembling hands. And then I remember nothing. What brought me back was a gentle voice. "Miss Ansell? Can you hear me?" I opened my eyes slowly. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, pale blue with fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. A soft beeping echoed nearby. I turned my head and saw a nurse standing beside me, adjusting an IV line. "You're in the hospital," she said. "You were brought in by a neighbor. They heard noises. Found you unconscious." I tried to speak, but it hurt to breathe. "You've got a fractured wrist, 2 bruised ribs, and a mild concussion. You're lucky it wasn't worse." I nodded slightly, blinking against the light. "You should talk to someone," she said, not unkindly. "There's counseling available. You don't have to deal with this alone." But I did. That evening, after they ran more tests and gave me something for the pain, I sat propped up in bed, staring at the ceiling. My body throbbed. My face was swollen. My spirit felt cracked, but not broken. The nurse came back and handed me my personal belongings, phone, wallet, and a small envelope. "This was sent by courier. Said it was urgent." I opened it slowly. Inside was an email printout from the fellowship committee. "Due to recent developments and concerns about your personal conduct, the committee is placing your scholarship under temporary hold pending further review." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered, to no one in particular, "Start documenting everything." Because I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger. This was about how people like them stay in power, and how people like me are expected to accept the cost of silence. But I was done staying quiet. 2 days after I was discharged from the hospital, I stepped through the front door of the house with a quiet resolve I hadn't felt in years. My wrist was still wrapped, my ribs ached with every step, and I moved slower than usual, but I was upright. More than that, I was focused. The house was oddly still. There were no voices, no sound from the television. The blinds were drawn halfway, casting wide stripes of sun across the living room floor. I dropped my overnight bag by the hall table and noticed a sticky note on the fridge, written in Vera's sharp cursive. "We need to talk about your behavior." My behavior. I didn't even pull the note off. I just stared at it until the letters blurred and then turned away. Callista wasn't home. Her car was gone, and there was no trace of her noise. No keys dropped on the counter, no purse slung across the chair. Vera must have been out too. That was fine. I needed the house empty for what I planned to do. I went straight to the old laptop in the kitchen. It was the same one I used to help Vera set up when she first started streaming sermons during the pandemic. Same password, too, our childhood pet's name and her birthday. I typed it in and opened the browser. There it was, still bookmarked, the admin panel for the home's smart speaker system. I clicked through, scanning the audio history. The system had been logging background sounds ever since we updated the firmware. Most families didn't know those files existed unless you went looking. I went looking. It didn't take long to find what I needed. The night of the attack was marked by time-stamped pings from the kitchen, hallway, and, most chillingly, my bedroom. My hand trembled as I clicked play on one file. A voice came through, low but distinct. Vera. She needs to be reminded who's the backbone of this family. Then, Callista. I'll keep it off her face. She's gotta learn. My stomach turned. I played the clip again, this time letting it roll longer. There was laughter, then silence, then the sound of something being set down, maybe a glass. Then Callista's voice again. Let her try to report anything. No one's going to believe her over us. I sat there, frozen. It wasn't just the words, it was how casual they sounded. Like this wasn't a plan to humiliate and hurt, but just another Thursday evening. I copied the files to a USB stick and backed them up on my cloud drive. Then I opened my phone and took a picture of the computer screen, making sure the dates and file names were clearly visible. My hands were steadier now. As I shut the laptop, a chime came from my phone. An email from Professor Ellison, the adjunct I'd worked with last semester. Subject line, quick question on your essay. I opened it and read, Hi Teresa, I reviewed your submission for the fellowship again. Something about it felt off. I remembered the draft you'd shown me in your notebook back in March. It had a different voice. Could you confirm that the final version submitted was yours? Just making sure everything's okay. A chill ran down my spine. I pulled my original draft from my Google Docs. The language was thoughtful, personal, reflective of my clinical experience in underserved communities. I downloaded the copy that had been sent to the fellowship committee, still stored in my email's sent folder under scholarship materials, but I hadn't sent this one. Someone else had uploaded it through the online portal. I compared the two side by side. Entire sections had been rewritten. Gone was the part about rural medicine and ethical dilemmas. Instead, paragraphs about merit-based access and competitive integrity appeared, phrases I'd never use, but I recognized. I'd seen them before. They were lifted almost verbatim from an essay Callista submitted 3 years ago for her grad school application. I closed my laptop slowly. I wasn't just being sabotaged, I was being erased and replaced. The scholarship committee was reviewing my application under the assumption that I had plagiarized, but it wasn't even my work. It was Callista's. I stood from the kitchen table, walked down the hallway, and paused outside my bedroom door. The same door she had shoved me through. I pushed it open gently. The mirror was still cracked where my shoulder had hit it. A long diagonal fracture cut across the top right corner, spiderwebbing toward the center. I walked up to it and stared at my reflection. My face was still puffy, bruising yellowed along my jaw. My left eye had mostly healed, but a faint shadow still lingered beneath it. I touched the frame of the mirror, then looked past my reflection, at the room behind me. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. One of us is going to break, I whispered. And this time, it won't be me. I turned from the mirror and began pulling open drawers. I retrieved every photo I'd taken of my injuries, every time-stamped screenshot, every email, every note. I backed up every file twice. Then I opened a manila folder, slid in the USB stick, and wrote on the front in block letters, for court. On my desk, I had a photo of my father. He died when I was 19, just before I graduated from community college. He was the only person in the house who ever told me I was enough without needing to be extraordinary. I picked up the frame and looked into his kind, squinting eyes. You always said I'd be stronger than them, I said, setting the frame back gently. Then I pulled out a new legal pad and wrote across the top, Timeline of events, May 2023. I listed everything, chronologically. From the email Vera sent without my knowledge, to the assault, to the tampered essay. As I wrote, I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I just cataloged. Because this was no longer about being believed. This was about being undeniable. I'd barely set down my bag when I heard the telltale clink of dishes from the dining room. The smell of something overly salted, Vera's go-to baked chicken lingered in the air, mingling with whatever floral candle she had burning in the corner to mask the tension none of us ever dared name out loud. Dinner was already plated when I walked in. No one said, "Welcome back." No one asked how I was feeling. Callista sat at the end of the table, scrolling through her phone, nails clacking against the screen. Vera didn't look up as I pulled out a chair. She just placed a folded paper next to my plate and said, "I need you to read this." I glanced at it briefly before cutting into my chicken. No words, no acknowledgement. I didn't even touch the paper. Vera's voice was calm, too calm. "I think it's better for everyone if you step away from the program, quietly, before this turns into something larger." I said nothing. "You withdrawing voluntarily keeps the family out of trouble," she continued, tone sweetened with that fake sugar she used with strangers. "It'll show them you're still capable of grace under pressure, that you know how to own up to your actions." I finally unfolded the paper. It was a typed letter addressed to the Easton Fellowship Committee, a formal, pre-written withdrawal statement. Vera had already filled in my name at the top, and hers as guardian at the bottom. Guardian. I was 28 years old. I folded the letter slowly, tucked it into my jacket pocket without a word, and stood up from the table. Vera didn't try to stop me. Callista didn't even glance up. I didn't go to my room. I didn't slam any doors. I walked straight through the kitchen, out to the garage, and started digging through the stack of boxes labeled Dad's. It was the scent that hit me first. Dust, paper, a faint trace of motor oil. The boxes hadn't been touched in years. Vera had stacked them after he passed and never went back. She used to say, "He was a good man, but the past belongs in the past," which always meant, "Don't dig too deep." I ignored that warning like it had never been spoken. Each box was filled with pieces of a man I missed more than I had allowed myself to admit. Old uniforms, books with notes scribbled in the margins, a few medals I didn't even know he'd received. Then I found it. A white envelope, weathered but sealed, tucked inside a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. On the front, in his handwriting, "Teresa, if I'm gone, and you need strength." My hands shook as I opened it. The letter wasn't long, but every word settled in my chest like bricks. If you're reading this, then things got hard again. They do, sometimes. People will try to make you small because that's easier than facing their own failures. But you are not fragile. They just made you think you were. You were born tougher than all of them combined. I swallowed hard, continued reading. "Don't fight to be seen, Teresa. Fight to be remembered. Let them talk. Let them doubt. But never let them write your ending." I sat down on the cold concrete floor, letter in my lap, breathing in shallow, uneven bursts. And then the tears came. Not from weakness, not from pain, but from the release of finally hearing someone believe in me again, even from beyond the grave. After a few minutes, I stood. I took out my phone and opened the draft Vera had started on my behalf, the email she wanted me to send withdrawing from the fellowship. I highlighted every word and deleted it. Then I opened a new document. Subject: Notice of legal misrepresentation. Body: To whom it may concern. This is to inform you that a withdrawal request previously sent under my name was neither authorized nor written by me. I have evidence to support that this and other actions were conducted without my knowledge and with malicious intent. I respectfully request the committee delay further review until I can present this documentation. Sincerely, Teresa Ansel. I hit save, but didn't send it yet. I needed more than words. I needed timing. Back inside, the living room buzzed with laughter. I paused at the hallway corner, unseen, and watched Vera and Callista sip wine like it was a holiday. Vera leaned into Callista, whispering something that made them both giggle. I clutched the folded letter from Dad in one hand and the USB stick in my jacket with the other. They didn't know what I had now. They thought I was still playing by the rules they wrote, still believing their silence had power, still hoping they'd love me if I just behaved long enough. But love wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted clarity. I wanted freedom. I wanted the story to be mine. I walked to the kitchen and set the folded withdrawal letter on the counter, right where Vera would find it in the morning. Next to it, I placed a sticky note. Not this time. Then I went back to my room, shut the door, and locked it. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about not letting them write my name in sand, hoping the tide would wash me away. I was carving it in stone. By the time morning settled over the house like a wet sheet, I'd already made a list. Not just a mental one, but an actual notepad filled with items to collect, names to contact, steps to take. I couldn't afford to guess anymore. I needed facts, evidence, timestamps. After pouring myself a cup of black coffee, I sat at the dining room table with my laptop. The hum of the fridge and the occasional clink of Vera's wind chimes outside were the only sounds I heard. No footsteps, no voices. Callista and Vera must have still been asleep or pretending not to be home. Fine by me. I opened the Easton Fellowship portal, logged in, and navigated to the My Submission tab. My chest tightened as the file loaded. I braced myself, knowing what I'd find. It wasn't my essay. The title was mine, but the content had been rewritten, sanitized. It lacked every personal touch, every insight I had poured into the original. Instead, it was filled with abstract language and generic commentary on ethics that felt rehearsed and cold. I clicked View Metadata. Uploaded May 12, 9:03 p.m. IP address matched to our home router. May 12th. I was still in the hospital. A sharp chill ran down my spine, not from surprise, but from the confirmation of what I already feared. Someone had intentionally replaced my work. And they did it while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from broken bones. I opened my own draft from Google Docs, side by side with the version submitted. It wasn't just edited, it had been rewritten. Paragraphs I knew by heart were stripped of context. The parts about my work in underserved communities were gone, and entire blocks of text were eerily familiar, not because they were mine, but because I had read them before. In Callista's grad school submissions, years ago, I took a screenshot, then another, every section, every discrepancy, each frame another brick in the case I was building. An hour later, I left the house to run a quick errand, painkillers and toothpaste. I stopped at the pharmacy on 3rd Street. When I tried to pay, my card declined. I tried again, declined. The cashier offered a polite smile and said, "Happens more than you think. Maybe call your bank?" I nodded, left the items on the counter, and walked to the parking lot. In the car, I called customer service. After verifying my identity, the rep on the line said, "Your account was recently accessed, and the password was changed from a device registered under the name Vera Langdon." I blinked. "I'm sorry," she added gently. "Is that someone you authorized?" "No," I said flatly. "Absolutely not." I drove home with the kind of fury that doesn't rise to the surface. It just simmers, low and steady, fueling every decision. Back at the house, I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I went straight to my room, pulled out a red Sharpie from my desk drawer, and retrieved the withdrawal letter Vera had given me 2 nights ago. Across the top of it, in big block letters, I wrote, "Denied. See you in court." Then I took it downstairs and set it on the kitchen counter, right next to the sugar bowl she used every morning for her coffee. No note, no explanation. She would know exactly what it meant. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Professor Ellison. When I walked into his office, his brow furrowed at the sight of the bandage still wrapped around my wrist. "Teresa," he said carefully, "you doing okay?" "No," I answered, "but I'm doing something about it." I sat across from him, laid down the 2 versions of the essay, and explained everything. He skimmed them, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, then to visible anger. "This isn't your voice," he said, tapping the submitted version. "And this section, I swear I saw this in one of Callista Gray's applications a few years back." "She lives with me," I said, "and she didn't get the fellowship." He stared at the documents, then at me. "Do you want me to make a statement?" "Yes," I said. "I need someone who isn't family to vouch for the truth." He nodded. "I'll have it notarized." From there, I contacted the university's student advocacy office. They assigned me a legal liaison, a woman named Dana, who listened quietly as I laid out everything. Tampering with your academic record, forged communication, identity breach, and the assault, she murmured as she jotted notes. You're not just dealing with family drama. This is layered. I know. And you're ready for it? I looked her straight in the eye. I've been ready since they chose to turn their backs. She gave me a slow nod. Then let's build this right. That night, I sat in my room, the only light coming from the desk lamp. Outside, the wind had picked up. The chimes clattered like they were impatient with me. I plugged in my hard drive, created a new folder, and titled it, In Case They Come First. Inside, I added the following: audio recordings, screenshots of both essay versions, photos of injuries, medical records, statement from Professor Ellison, banking access log, notes from Dana. When the final file uploaded, I opened a new document and typed one sentence across the top. They underestimated the one they tried to bury. Then I sat back, looked at my reflection in the window, and didn't flinch. By the time I opened my eyes the next morning, I already knew something had shifted. Not in the air. No. The weather was the same humid drizzle North Carolina always carried in early summer. But in me, it was the kind of morning where you don't roll over and check your phone first. You sit up, feet on the floor, breath steady, mind clear. I went downstairs, made myself coffee, and walked past the counter where I had left the "See you in court" note the day before. It was gone. No mention of it. Vera didn't say anything when she passed me in the hallway. She just walked by, her heels clicking against the hardwood like punctuation marks. By lunchtime, I got the email. Subject: Notice of Mental Health Inquiry, Easton Fellowship Review. I stared at it longer than I should have before opening. The committee had received an anonymous but concerning letter regarding your psychological profile and behavioral history. It stated I had struggled with emotional dysregulation and hallucinations rooted in perceived persecution. The sender: Vera Langdon. There was a PDF attached, signed and scanned. It didn't outright call me unstable. It cloaked itself in concern. My daughter has always been bright but sensitive, prone to misinterpreting others' intentions. She means well, but I'm afraid stress brings out episodes. Episodes. That word hit harder than anything Callista had ever thrown. I stared at the wall in front of me. No movement, no tears. Just that same sensation I'd come to know. Being erased. One careful lie at a time. I didn't scream. I didn't storm out. I opened a new browser tab and sent an email to the therapist my employer had required me to see every quarter. Hi, Dr. Brooks. I need a signed statement confirming that I have no documented mental health diagnosis. Please let me know if you need a formal request. She replied within an hour. Teresa, absolutely. I'll prepare the document today. For the record, your files reflect nothing but a pattern of resilience under prolonged familial stress. You've shown remarkable emotional clarity. I exhaled and pressed my palms into the table. That same afternoon, as I scanned the printout of Vera's letter, I got a message request on Facebook. I almost ignored it, figured it was spam, but the name made me pause. Harold Wexler. Mr. Wexler had been my English teacher in senior year. He used to leave handwritten comments in red ink, not just "good job" or "fix this," but full paragraphs explaining what made a sentence powerful. The kind of teacher who saw what you didn't know you were hiding. His message read, I saw what's happening. You were always solid, even when the world didn't make it easy. If you need someone to speak up on your behalf, I will. I blinked, reread it. Then I typed, Thank you. I'd appreciate anything you're willing to write. He sent me a PDF the next morning, on school letterhead, notarized. To whom it may concern, I taught Teresa Ansel during her senior year. In a class of 134 students, she was the only one who submitted every assignment early, helped classmates without seeking credit, and endured the fallout of a chaotic home life without once playing victim. If this is the same Teresa under scrutiny, I would stake my reputation on her honesty. I read it 3 times, slower each time, not because I didn't understand it, but because someone finally said what I'd never dared claim for myself. I didn't send it to the committee yet. First, I made copies. I posted Vera's letter and Mr. Wexler's side by side in a private alumni group online. No commentary, just the facts. Within an hour, the comments began. Wait, her mother wrote that? Who does that to their own child? I don't know, Teresa, but this is sick. Then it spread. My inbox filled with quiet support, old classmates, acquaintances, people who had sat next to me in biology or borrowed my notes once. She was always decent. Kept to herself, but sharp. I remember when she helped me pass English, never told anyone. None of this made me whole again, but it reminded me I wasn't invisible. That night, after the kitchen light flicked off and the TV dimmed, I heard footsteps in the hallway. A pause outside my door, then a knock. I didn't answer, but the door creaked open anyway. Vera stepped in, arms crossed, face unreadable. You're making this worse than it ever had to be, she said, her voice like lukewarm water. I didn't stand. I didn't offer tea or comfort. I looked at her with the same detachment she'd mastered years ago. I'm not making anything, I said quietly. I'm just showing them what was always there. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She just stared at me, her jaw tense. For a split second, I saw something flicker. Maybe fear. Maybe realization. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door behind her with a softness that felt staged. I sat there for a long time after. Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom, not with rage, not with desperation, but with truth. And I was going to let it speak louder than anything they ever tried to hide. I didn't sleep the night before court. I don't know if it was nerves or something deeper, maybe the quiet refusal of my body to let me rest before a reckoning. I stayed up in my room with every file, photo, voice recording, and medical document laid out in front of me like I was studying for the final exam of my life. At dawn, I got dressed. Dark navy suit, hair tied back, minimal makeup, no attempt to look fragile, no need to soften myself. The sling on my arm still served as an unspoken truth no one could refute. Dana picked me up at 7:30 sharp. She didn't say much. She knew better than to ask how I was feeling. As we drove toward the courthouse, I stared out the window while the trees passed by like silent witnesses. By 8 o'clock, we arrived. The courthouse was smaller than I expected, modest brick building with a few steps leading to glass doors. Inside, the lobby buzzed with murmurs and the clatter of heels on tile. My name was already on the docket. The courtroom itself wasn't grand. The gallery held about 30 chairs. Half were filled. A few familiar faces, former teachers, an old colleague from the clinic. Press sat in the back with quiet anticipation. Word had spread. Not gossip this time, but interest. Vera sat 3 rows behind the defense table, composed as always. Callista, seated beside her lawyer, wore a polished expression like she was still convinced this was just a misunderstanding that a smile and a polished sentence would fix. I didn't sit. I stood with Dana as the judge entered and called the case. Ansel v. Langdon and Gray. The opening statements were brief. The judge had already reviewed the written filings and had no patience for theatrics. Then came the evidence. We started with the injuries. Photos from the hospital, bruises, fractured wrist, medical scans. The ER doctor took the stand. These weren't accidental, he stated plainly. Blunt force, consistent with a fall against a hard surface, followed by impact trauma. Next came the digital evidence. I presented screenshots of emails I never wrote, metadata showing the scholarship essay was submitted from the family IP while I was hospitalized. Then the voice recording. Dana handed over the file. The courtroom went still as the audio played. Vera's voice. She needs to be reminded who's the backbone of this family. Callista. I'll keep it off her face. She's gotta learn. A woman in the gallery gasped. Callista's face turned pale. The judge didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed. Next, Mr. Wexler testified. Calm, clear. Teresa never played victim. Even when we knew things at home weren't stable, she never once asked for special treatment. She carried herself with dignity, and I stand by every word in my letter. The final witness was Dr. Brooks, my therapist. There is no history of mental instability, she confirmed. In fact, Teresa showed remarkable resilience under extreme pressure. Her records reflect strength, not volatility. By the time we rested our case, there was nothing left to say. Callista's attorney tried to argue emotional stress. Said the recording was taken out of context. Vera refused to testify, invoking her right to avoid self-incrimination. The judge called for a brief recess. When we reconvened, the room held its breath. The verdict came swift and clean. Callista Gray, guilty of assault, obstruction, academic misrepresentation, sentenced to 1-year probation, 200 hours community service, and a no-contact order with the plaintiff for 5 years. She didn't cry. She just sat there like the air had been sucked from the room. Vera Langdon, found complicit in obstruction and libel, subject to a restraining order, immediate removal from all academic recommendation boards. A formal retraction must be submitted to the Easton Fellowship Committee. I didn't celebrate. I walked out of the courtroom alone, past reporters and microphones, past Dana and the few kind faces who had stayed to support me. Outside, the sun was unforgiving. A journalist rushed up, mic extended. "Teresa, do you have any comment for your family?" I paused. "They taught me how to survive," I said, "just not the way they intended." And then I walked. By the time evening rolled around, I was back home, packing a few last things. I passed through the hallway and saw Vera at the front door. A small suitcase rested beside her. Her eyes met mine for the first time in weeks. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. I stepped aside. "Goodbye," I said. She blinked once, picked up her bag, and left. That night, for the first time in months, I slept. Not dreamlessly, but without fear. The morning after Vera left was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel like peace, but like possibility. I sat at the small breakfast table with a cup of coffee and no audience. No tension thick in the air. No sarcastic comments hanging from across the room. Just silence. Earned, not given. I hadn't touched the living room since the trial. Her perfume still clung to the curtains, faint but stubborn, the kind of scent that didn't leave unless you made it. So I opened every window, every door, let the air move freely for the first time in what felt like forever. Then I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I wasn't going to write an exposé. I wasn't interested in revenge or making anyone look bad. I just wanted to tell the truth. Mine. I logged into the Easton alumni portal, clicked into the reflections section of the mentorship group, and began typing. I don't want pity. I don't need validation. But I've learned that when you keep a story locked inside for too long, it turns on you. It becomes a weight, not a memory. I'm writing this for anyone who's been quietly punished for succeeding. For anyone who was told to dim their light because someone else's ego couldn't stand the brightness. I didn't name Vera. I didn't name Callista. But I told the story, fact for fact, the forged essay, the hospital stay. The photos, the judgment, and how, somehow, the worst part wasn't the attack or the lies. It was the moment I screamed for help, and no one moved. I ended the post with one line. Surviving should not be an act of rebellion. But if it is, then I rebel with truth. I clicked publish. That afternoon, I walked to the small grocery store up the road. The clerk, who usually pretended not to recognize me, gave a nod and said, "Glad to see you still standing, Teresa." It wasn't dramatic, just a sentence, but it stuck. Word spreads in towns like this, especially when it travels through community boards and church groups. I didn't care who read the post. I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for me. For the girl who once hid her spelling bee trophy in the closet because she didn't want to make Callista feel small. By the end of the week, I got an envelope from Easton. They reinstated my scholarship. No apology letter, no explanation, just reinstated. And that was enough. 2 weeks later, I accepted a fellowship at a local law school's justice reform project. I wasn't switching careers, not entirely, but I'd be spending a portion of my time mentoring students who wanted to use their education to protect others, victims of domestic coercion. Students whose parents thought abuse could be rewritten with good grammar and fake smiles. My new office was small, bare walls, basic desk, but I didn't care. The first email in my inbox was from a sophomore asking, "How do you know when to speak up?" I wrote back, "When the silence starts to feel like complicity." One morning, while sorting through my belongings, I found the envelope again, the one Dad left me. I'd read it more times than I could count. But that day, I finally framed it. Simple frame. Clear glass. I hung it on the wall beside my application to the state's Bar Association. You are not fragile. They just made you think you were. I looked at the words, then at myself in the reflection. Time passed slowly after that, not because I was waiting for anything, but because I finally stopped running. I didn't go back to see Vera. She never reached out. I heard through a neighbor she'd left town, moved in with an old friend out west. Someone said she'd been asked to step down from a church committee. Someone else mentioned her Facebook had gone dark. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I was just done. At one therapy session, Dr. Brooks asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window for a long time, watching a bird land on a crooked branch, adjust its wings, and take off again. Finally, I said, "I don't need to. That's not what healing looks like for me." Forgiveness wasn't a finish line. It wasn't even a goal. It was a door some people chose to open, and some didn't. I didn't need to walk through it to know I'd already left the building. That evening, I returned home, made tea, and sat by the window as the sun dipped below the trees. I reached into the drawer beside me, pulled out the printed email from the scholarship committee, and tucked it away into a folder labeled "Closed." Not erased, just finished. Before bed, I stood at my doorway, looked back at my small office, my bookshelves, my framed letter, and I smiled, not because everything was fine, but because I was finally okay with it not being. Some scars never fade, but they do stop bleeding. Eventually, some families don't break you with fists. They do it with silence, with doubt, and with the belief that you won't fight back. But when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be heard. Have you ever been made to feel like the villain in your own family's story just for succeeding? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might just speak the truth you've been holding in for years.